Guess who's back?
Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to have a new video talking about NFL draft trades and predictions that we have, possibilities, kind of tying into what our previous video was, the NFL mock draft. We didn't have any trades in that, so we're going to kind of fill that gap and talk about all the possibilities that we think could happen at the end of April. So first off, we're going to start at the very, very top. We're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals. So they have the number 1 pick, and there was already a report just yesterday that the Dolphins are exploring the possibility of going up to number 1 overall, trading with the Bengals. The Dolphins have a treasure trove of picks all throughout this draft and even next year's draft with the trades that they've made. But the Bengals, currently where they're sitting at, and of course the player that almost everyone has going to the Bengals is Joe Burrow, which we also predicted in our mock. The Bengals, they currently have a pick in every round, 1 pick in every round. So they have 7 total picks, which in comparison to a team like the Dolphins, I believe they have 12 or 13 overall picks. 14 picks. And then there's a team like, I believe the Vikings have 12 picks, and I believe the Patriots have quite a few picks too from compensatory and all that. But
the Patriots actually led the way with the most compensatory picks received.
So what would it take for a team like the Dolphins to go up to number 1? And I'm guessing they would go up to take Joe Burrow. One of the issues, I guess you could say, with the whole COVID-19 or coronavirus thing is that there's not as many tests or interviews or anything with players. So a player like Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback from Alabama that many have going to the Dolphins, and this goes for every team. No individual team is going to get to have their doctor examine him and go through a full test on his hip and come to their own determination of what his health status is going to be. So all they can really go off of right now is the combine testing and, of course, Tua's own doctors, which we can kind of, say that will be more optimistic than anyone else. So if the Dolphins don't want to take a gamble on that and they just want to trade all the way up to number 1, what would it take? So the Dolphins, they currently own 3 first-round picks, the 5th overall pick, the 18th overall pick, and the 26th overall pick. They also have 2 second-round picks, the 39th and the 56th overall. Yep. They have a 3rd, they have 1 in the 4th, 3 in the 5th, and 1 in the 6th, and 3 in the 7th. Now, obviously, it's going to take a whole lot more than those late-day picks to go up. I think at the bare minimum, you're looking at all their first-round picks to go up to number 1, and possibly even a number 1 pick in the next year's draft, which I believe they have 2 first-round picks in the 2021 draft as well. So,
and maybe that wouldn't be the case if it wasn't a franchise quarterback at 1, but in this case, it is.
Yes, and there's maybe 2 in this class. It's not like 2018 where there was. We didn't know it at the time, but there were 4 potentially there. They still got a ways to go, but there were 4: Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and Lamar Jackson. In this case, there are only 2 guys that you can really, really project to be the franchise guy, and one of them has health issues. So if the Dolphins were to go up, they'd be pretty much giving away 3 quality picks in the first round and then possibly a pick next year. So if you want to see a big time shakeup and a big time trade, that would be starting at the very top right there. So going to the next possibility, and this is the most realistic spot that I see a trade happening in the draft, is with the Detroit Lions 3rd pick overall. Detroit, honestly, you could mock them taking one of these quarterbacks. If they're not sold or all in Matthew Stafford anymore at this point. He's had up and downs. He's had injuries in his career. But the thing is, if you were to take a quarterback there, you'd still be tied to Matt Stafford. He's got a gargantuan cap hit and dead money hit if you were to trade or even release him. I believe it's like $25 million. So you're going to be, having that ball and chain on your franchise for the next few years. With him or without him. But if Stafford is the guy and Detroit decides, hey, obviously we have a lot more needs outside of one particular player at number 3, then that could be a spot where somebody goes up. And the Lions also have 7 picks. They have 1 first-round pick, a second, a third, a fourth, 2 fifths, and a sixth. This could be another spot where the Dolphins come up, and conceivably, maybe the Lions are asking for the same thing if the Dolphins like Tua enough, or let's say the Chargers want to go up. The Chargers have a whole lot less capital. They would have to give up a lot of future picks to go up to the Lions pick and select whichever quarterback they favor over the other. But the Lions, I believe, could be the winners of this draft if they were to get some kind of huge haul in return for that number 3 pick because of the value of these quarterbacks and how other teams might feel about them. There's no guarantee that any of the potentially top 3 quarterbacks make it to 5. We've seen crazy things happen in the draft. So the Lions at the 3rd overall pick, I'll be looking at that spot for sure for some trades to happen whenever the date comes. And
that's the biggest part. Like right off the bat, when it hits number 3, it's like, okay, what's going to happen here? And that'll be the first domino to fall, I guess. Or even if they do stay there and pick, then that'll be really take off. And according to a lot of people's mock drafts, including ours, we have quarterbacks going, offensive tackles going, and Okuda going to them, and that really, if that happens, it really kind of shapes things up for a really, I guess, normalization of what everybody's kind of thinking right now.
Yeah, and then if the Lions were to move back, they could take probably an Isaiah Simmons or let's say an Okuda at 5. Probably one of the 2 will be falling to them. Or if something even crazier happens, maybe Chase Young makes it all the way to 5. I mean, I don't see that happening, but it could. So almost everyone has them going defense, and they could still get one of the quality defensive players in the draft if they were to move back. So the Dolphins, they would be the next. I mean, they're the 5th overall pick, and they have all those picks. They can move wherever they want, really. If there's one particular player, let's say in the around pick 10 that they want, I mean, they could easily go up and get them, or maybe in the early 20s they could go up and get them. They just have so much capital in this draft and the next to make whatever move they want. But you got to believe that it's got to center around a quarterback and then protecting the quarterback.
In most case scenarios that played out like this, it's like if you get your guy at quarterback, then it's a matter of either who do you feel is the next best offensive lineman, and is he still on the board, or who do you feel is the best weapon out of the receivers, out of Judy, Lamb, and Ruggs, and it's like, okay, we're gonna move up and we need to go get this guy for our guy that we just got, and that'll be the most likely scenario that probably happens after, if they do take a quarterback with their first pick.
So the Dolphins, there will be big players. The next team that would be coming up, I talked briefly about it, the Chargers. Now they have 1 pick in each round, just like the Bengals, just like the Lions, or the Lions have 2 6th rounds. But so they don't have much in this draft, but they do, of course, always have the future round picks. They'd be pretty much bargaining with their entire future into one player if they wanted to go up to our quarterback. I don't know if they're willing to do that, but they are set on almost every position on their team.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's a wise thing to do with moving your team to having a new start and wanting fans to have some excitement. I mean, I feel like they could be a team that takes a chance on Newton in the offseason. It still hasn't happened yet, still hasn't shaped out, but that's where a lot of people predicted as soon as Newton got released. I really feel like if anything, I feel like they're a team that should move back because they don't have a lot.
Yeah. And, I mean, that also depends on if a quarterback does fall to them. I mean, I don't know. Justin Herbert is conceivably the guy that could fall to them. But his, I guess, pedigree as far as what people are ranking him as a player is all over the place. Some people have him not even in the first round. And they consider him in a whole tier separate from Tua and Joe Burrow. So it really depends on how the Chargers feel about him. But RJ did mention in our mock draft that last year Herbert would have been their number 1 overall quarterback in last year's class. So if that still stays the same, I don't know how much one season would have turned them off of him. I feel like they would still stick with him and stick with the pick and pick him. The next team, the Carolina Panthers. So they have a pick in every round as well. I have them highlighted as probably a move back type of player. So in this draft, they have a new coach, Matt Rule's there, and they have a lot of needs in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They could use some more juice on offense. They do have DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey, but I believe Curtis Samuel's deal is coming up. And some people don't really view DJ Moore as a true one. I think he's a true one.
He's a true one.
But he's more of a savvy route runner type guy, and he's very explosive whenever he with yards after the catch. They don't really have a big vertical threat or a speed jump ball receiver. So I feel like they could move back in this draft, gain some picks, and possibly still get one of those guys. Or if they wanted to pick a defensive lineman, after their pick, the only team that I see possibly getting defensive tackle is probably maybe the Jags if they want to go best player available. But either one of the two, Derek Brown or Javon Kinlaw, could be at the Panthers pick wherever they trade back to, as long as they're before the mid-teens picks. So if those are the spots they're looking at, they could gain some picks by moving back.
And I feel like a lot of the determining factors for starting this part of the draft is going to be whether teams value the skill position more, or like we have in our mock draft where you start seeing a run of offensive linemen. So it's like, do teams want to move up and really get that big guy, or is it, like I said, just stay normal and keep everything afloat with run on the offensive tackles and reassure up their either their defensive line or offensive line.
And the Jets are kind of in that position where they could use protection and they could use a big-time receiver as well. But they're going to have a little part in this whenever we continue on. The next team, we're going to go all the way down to pick number 13 and technically pick number 31 with the San Francisco 49ers. So they made the trade with the Colts to gain that 13th overall pick. They sent DeForest Buckner to the Colts in exchange for that pick. So they have two picks in the first round, pick 13 and pick 31, and then there's a giant gap until they pick again. They don't pick again until the 5th round, the 156th overall pick. So you got to think that they're going to want at least a couple of picks in between those rounds. I mean, between the 2nd and 4th round. So at pick number 13, we had them taking a receiver. I believe we had CeeDee Lamb falling to them. Yeah, CeeDee Lamb. Yeah. And they do need a receiver. They also need cornerback. In our mock, they get both. But after that, then there's that gap. So at 13, this is where I'm going to bring the Cowboys in. If you get to 13, and let's just say our mock does go the way it does, and CeeDee's there at 13, and you say, hey, 49ers, we'll give you guys our 1st round pick, and we'll give you our 2nd round pick. Or, maybe you go by the trade. I don't have the trade chart in front of me, but maybe the 1st and the 3rd round pick. That'll still be one more pick than they have in a later round. Can we go up from 17 and get up to 13? Maybe
they could use that extra 3rd round pick, and they still have a back into the 1st round to maybe gain more picks in the mid level in the 2nd round.
So then they'll have pick 17, 31, and then that additional 3rd round pick. So you're only moving back 4 spots with a team that really needs some capital in those mid rounds of the draft. There's a lot of quality talent in those rounds in the 2nd and 3rd round that they could really use on their team. So just really depends on what the 49ers want to do. But, I mean, that's a huge, huge gap. Once you get into the 5th and 6th round, those players are really your gamble, your special team guys. They may not even make the roster.
Yeah.
You want to get some at least starter level quality players, more than just 2 of them on your team.
A couple of them are just camp bodies, or do you end up signing?
Especially in the 7th. So look at that as an opportunity. If you're a fan of any team in the 20s or 30s even, maybe the 49ers will be willing to let your team go up and trade with them because they need some picks desperately. The next team, the Minnesota Vikings, I could see them as being big players in the 1st round, and anywhere in this draft they have a lot of picks. So they have 2 1st round picks, a 2nd round pick, 2 3rd round picks, a 4th, a 5th, 2 6ths, and 3 7ths. Of course, they gained an additional 1st round pick from Buffalo, number 22 in the trade of Stephon Diggs. So their immediate needs are wide receiver, edge rusher, and corner. Corner should be number 1. I mean, they really have Mike Hughes, which was their draft pick from UCF a couple years back. And then that's about it.
What was the year that they came out with Anthony Barr and they hit on their first?
That was 2014.
Yeah, they hit on both their 1st round draft picks, and it really set them up to be good for a little bit and not have to pay their guys. And I feel like at this point, I think they're one of the lowest teams with the amount of cap space probably left. Like, they're really tight.
Yeah.
And so I feel like with all this capital and amount of draft picks, you kind of need to hit again on the guys in the first couple of rounds, first, second, third, to be able to kind of like reestablish we have a young core again. Mm-hmm. We don't have to pay them for a while and get that going.
So the players that I had highlighted for the Vikings, let's say they want to move up because their picks, they're very, very late in the first round. They have pick number 22 and 25 in the first, so very, very close to each other. So let's say CeeDee Lamb or CJ Anderson falls into a 15 area or mid-teens area. If they want a premier player at that position, because there's a big gap in receiver of the elite tier and there's a big gap in corner in the elite tier, and those are the two players that could be there, and they wouldn't have to give up as much to get up there. If they wanted to, they have the capital to go way up. It would just take a willing partner, and they'd probably have to give up both the first and then the second and then possibly both of their
they're all mid-round picks.
Yeah, pretty much they're both of their thirds as well.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that to go up and get a Jeff Okudah if he were to slide or something like that, which is possibly not likely, but we don't know what player's going to slide. There's always a player or two that starts sliding. So the Vikings could be big time players. A couple of the franchise tag players that I wanted to hit on that could be draft day targets. Yannick Ngakoue of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Me and RJ were just talking about him yesterday.
Yeah.
So he's looking for elite level contract, probably around $20 million a year deal. Whoever he were to get traded to would have to agree to pay him. I don't know if the Jaguars could fetch a first round pick for him, but I think they could definitely get a second round pick for him because he does have production. It was a pretty good defensive line and defensive mates that he was playing alongside, but I think they could get at least a second round pick. So on the day of the draft, be looking out for his name. Trent Williams of the Washington Redskins, the left tackle. I don't see any way how they keep him on the team. They have to get whatever value they can get for him this year. Maybe look at a team like the Jets. They need left tackle help. Pretty much any team that needs offensive line help. Maybe they want to take a player in the draft and they could toss a second round pick to the Redskins for him, because I don't think they're getting a first round pick, especially after because any team that trades with them knows that the Redskins aren't going to be able to play him. Last year, Williams sat out the whole year. He'd probably do it again. I mean, he already did it. So maybe they get a second round pick for him. And then tying back into the Cowboys, the player that was in talks and the rumors and everything, and Jamal Adams of the Jets. So he probably fetch the Jets that 17th overall pick.
No, for sure.
I just wanted to bring him up because would you do it? I think I would do it because if you trade for him, he's looking for a new deal. He's already said that. I looked it up. So Spot Trek predicted his contract to be, when he signs a new deal, probably 6 years, $77.6 million deal, average salary about $12.9 million. So let's just say $13 million. Right now, if the Cowboys traded for him, they could afford to pay him and give him the deal right now. They have $28 million, I believe, in cap space. If they get a long-term Dak deal done, an additional 12 to 15 million would open up this year. They could do it. He's a playmaker, a game changer on the back end, and he would make me much more excited, like the Amari Cooper deal a couple of years ago, where he's your first round pick. Yes. I would take him over any player that could possibly fall to 17.
And people like the excitement of having the draft and getting a new player, and plus I would really be excited for a guy like CeeDee and stuff like that. Barring has been that it turns out to be one of the best wide receiver classes we've ever seen. But Jamal Adams is an all-pro. He's a for sure thing. That's what it is. He's for sure. Mm-hmm. He's top-level tier player. PFF has had him have one of the highest-graded players for the past couple of years since he came into the NFL. It doesn't get any more sure than that. So. And
there's no safety in this class that even projects to what he was whenever he was coming out. He would have been the clear number one overall safety this year, and then there would be a big tier, and then there'd be the next guy. There's nobody like him at the safety position in this class. So then a couple of teams that would have to come way up, RJ has, starting off with the Seahawks that he wanted to bring up, maybe if they were to make a move.
Yeah, Seattle's never been a team that does anything really for Russell, and it feels like it kind of leaves us scratching his head. They kind of leave us scratching our head, especially with the Rashad Penny pick a couple years ago, towards the end of the draft. And I feel like if the draft does set up a way where teams are valuing the skill position more than the offensive line, and we don't see a run on the offensive tackles, I feel like you kind of, and there's the top 3 guys there that are starting to move back, and then you get teams like in the mid, San Francisco, Dallas, that were really valuing those skill positions, but they're gone. Then maybe you can try to make a deal with one of them to go ahead and get one of those top offensive linemen, because you've never done anything for Russell. You've never secured his offensive line. You've never made that big splash to protect his blind side or anything like that.
So in our mock, we had Andrew Thomas going at 14 to the Tampa Bay Bucks. So let's just say we were talking about San Francisco at 13. If Andrew Thomas is still there, maybe Seattle can go all the way up to 13 and then select him there. It's always a possibility, but yeah, they really haven't made much of an investment to protect Russell other than the trade for Dwayne Brown a couple of years ago. That's about it. The next team RJ brought up was the Indianapolis Colts. They traded away their 13th overall pick to the 49ers to get DeForest Buckner, but they're very much in the same boat as the Bucks, where they're rolling the dice on a veteran and trusting in what they already have to go and compete for a championship this year and maybe one more year after that.
Oh, they have no first round. They do have 2 second-round picks, but at the same time, if we do see a quarterback slippage like you were saying earlier, then maybe they would want to go ahead and get a guy for the future, even though they just signed Rivers, or go all in and take a guy that would help out either the offense, or their offensive line is pretty shored up already.
Yeah, they have a good offensive line. Outside skill positions, they've taken a few receivers every year, but nobody's really exploded. They have T.Y. Hilton. So outside of T.Y., there's not much on the outside. I know they took Paris Campbell last year, but he's more like a slot. If a guy like CeeDee's there, maybe a Judy, maybe they want to go up for him if they're really, really gambling on a Rivers. Or I feel like quarterback, I feel like one of these guys between Love and Herbert is going to start sliding into the 20s, and one of these teams is going to want to come up and take him, kind of like whenever Teddy Bridgewater started to slide in his draft class and coming back into the first round somehow and taking one of those guys. But
and even when it happened with Lamar,
yeah,
he got
Lamar.
picked.
So those are a bunch of possibilities. Of course, any team can trade at any point. There's always a lot of trades in the first round, but these are the spots that we think where things can happen, and some of the players that we see would be involved in these trades. I think RJ, relating to Cowboys, you mentioned like a Jeff Okudah if he slid to like a 10 spot.
Yeah, which we could see happening because you still don't know what's going to happen with the Lions. We'll see it depending on the quarterback situation. They may want to take a quarterback. They may end up taking a guy like Derek Brown. And then from there, you could see a run on the quarterback with Herbert and Tua with Miami and Los Angeles. But back in February, there was an article put out by Tony Pauline from Pro Football Networks. She said Jerry reportedly wants to make a big splash in the draft, and one of the players names that did come up was Jeffrey Okudah. So I feel like that would be a big time get if you were to be able to move up into maybe no more than the 10th spot, because if not, then you're really paying a king's ransom for trying to get someone like that, because he is so. I know we just lost Byron, so it's kind of like, oh, you're moving up to get a cornerback, but Okudah is so much like. Man, he's kind of like, I hate to put so much on him, especially for me. I don't want. I'll eat my crow, but he's already like at an all-pro level.
I mean, he's very, very smooth. I mean, a lot of it has to do with who you're going to face, and the Cowboys are going to face some pretty big-time receivers this year. I think it's possible for them.
He has all-pro written on him. There you go. I'm not going to say he has already on that level.
The thing is, they would have to probably, to get up that high, they would have to probably give up their 17 this year and possibly next year's first round pick. So Are you going to give up 2 first-round picks for a player that you're just replacing Byron with? I don't know. That would frustrate me beyond belief whenever you could have just signed a player like Byron, you know?
Yeah, hold on.
Because currently the Cowboys have 7 picks. They have a first, a second round, a third round, a fourth round, 2 fifths, and a 7th in this draft.
Let's see. Hold on. When the Cowboys went up to get Claiborne, they moved up 8 spots. And let me see. The Cowboys made a trade with St. Louis, sending their number 14 pick, their second round selection, 45th to the Rams. So that left Dallas with only 1 pick Friday, 81st overall. And dang, so in that year we only gave up our second round pick to move up 8 spots. That's crazy.
No, it was a good value at that time. I mean,
but not barring you didn't know that what was going to.
You didn't know what was going to happen, but in that class, Claiborne was the clear number 1 overall corner, like Okuda was this year. So, I mean, could you do it? I don't know if you would still be able to go up that far with just a second round pick. Is it possible? Yes. Would I do it? If it's just you're giving up 17 in your second, yeah, I'd do it. If you're going to have to give up a first this year and a first next year, I wouldn't do it just because of Byron, and they could have signed Byron. They could have had Byron back. They could have signed Chris Harris for what he got, which was only $10 million per, and you would have been okay at that position. I wouldn't mortgage my future on 1 cornerback, 2 first-round picks. I'd much rather, like we said before, trade my first this year for Jamal Adams and get him done on a deal because I know what I'm going to get, and immediately give a playmaker, impact player on your defense, and arguably could be your best defender on your defense outside of DeMarcus Lawrence. So it's always a possibility, and even for another team, if there's always going to be a player that slides. I think my prediction is a player like Derek Brown would be the player to slide in his first round because he plays 1 tech. A lot of teams don't value that as much. I think he'd be an awesome addition to the Cowboys, but at pick 17, if he were to fall that, then that's a value because he's an overall top 10 prospect, but the position he plays is not a value to many teams. He could be a player that falls. Conceivably, any one of the top 3 receivers could fall if teams start thinking to their later picks and like, well, this guy versus this guy, I could take another player here and still get a Raker later or a Mims later or a T. Higgins way later. Maybe one of them starts sliding. But, I mean, there's so many possibilities for the Cowboys. Or they could just do what everyone expects them to do and stick and pick at 17 and hope to God that a top 10 value player gets there, and you don't have to settle for a K'Lavon Chaisson or maybe an Xavier McKinney whenever you could, move back and maybe get some picks, which is the scenario that I hope happens is they see what's there and they say, all right, let's move back with a team like Minnesota who has multiple picks. They like a player better and go up and get somebody, or Seattle if a tackle falls, like RJ was saying. So, but I think that pretty much is that hit everything for you.
Again, I guess we are Cowboys fans. This is kind of more than likely more so a Cowboys channel, but I feel like 13 I feel like what you were saying, that's the biggest suitor for Dallas if we do value that skill position. And again, this will be a big tell on what this front office and what the new coaching staff is really taking this team towards, and what are they going to like to do. But I feel like we could already kind of have a tell of that based off McCarthy's past as far as philosophy and how he likes to run his offense, not necessarily what he's going to be doing this year as far as taking a year off and play calling and stuff like that, and how he's adapted his game. But as far as what he's done in the past with his offenses, it's mainly been weapons and throwing the ball. So
are you going to build on what your strength is on offense, or are you going to try and be balanced, which is what the Cowboys have kind of typically tried to do, is stay balanced and then spend as little as possible in free agency, which they kind of did this year already. So a lot to look forward to. Be on the lookout for our next video. We appreciate you guys watching. If you have any thoughts about these trades and who your team is picking, or maybe something you saw in our mock draft, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and be on the lookout for the next one.
Yo, I ain't here for the money, I ain't here for the fame. Though it might be nice to own a jet plane, I'ma do it all offer you. Come along and see it's true, but the world is pretty cold. You might need a sweater too. I'ma put it right on ya. Kid from California, trying to make it in life. In school they never taught ya. Dream